March has come and gone, which means we're almost a month into a brand new tax year. And this year, it's not business as usual. In the 2026 budget speech, government introduced changes that directly affect how South Africans save, invest, and plan for retirement. From a higher tax-free savings limit to an increased cap on deductible retirement contributions, the rules have shifted at a time when many investors are resetting their financial plans for the year ahead. Welcome to Everything Counts, the podcast where we have the money conversations that matter. How to save it, how to grow it, and how to protect it, and how to make it work for you. When everything counts, we share the information you need to get your financial ducks in a row. Hello, I'm Motheo Khoaripe, your host, and joining me once again are Investec financial advisor Vumi Dludlu and Johan Loubser, the head of advisor enablement at Investec. Today we unpack what has mostly changed in budget 2026, what it means for savers and investors, and most importantly, what you should be doing now at the very start of the new tax year to make the most of the updated regulations. Thank you guys for joining us again. It was a very smooth 2026 budget this time around, but as taxpayers and people that look out for things like rebates, that's what we were watching for. Let's get into the conversation of that 2026 budget. Johan, it's the beginning of the new tax year. Why does the start of the new tax year matter so much for savers and investors?
Motheo, good to be back and having this conversation. To answer your question, every year, or every new calendar year, we think about New Year's resolutions, a clean slate, a chance to do things slightly better than the previous year. So in the world of saving and investments, the new tax year works exactly the same. It's a chance to reset. It's a chance to re-look at your savings and investments. And what the new tax year brings is that contribution limits restart at zero. Certain tax thresholds are refreshed or changed, and certain exemptions become available again. And that's why the start of the new tax year matters so much. It's your annual opportunity to put good financial habits in place early rather than trying to fix them at the end of the tax year.
When we were having our discussion in the first part of this discussion on tax-free savings, things hadn't changed, things hadn't moved on. But as time would have it, a lot has been moved around by the minister. Can you just touch on some of the things that have been updated since then?
Sure, Motheo. I think the two big pieces was around the tax-free savings contribution limit that has increased from 36,000 Rand per tax year to 46,000 Rand per tax year. And then you also mentioned around the retirement contribution threshold. So the limit or the upper end of the limit used to be 350,000 Rand per year that you can contribute towards a retirement vehicle such as a retirement annuity, pension fund, provident fund. That upper limit is now moved to 430,000 Rand per year, giving a little bit more leeway in terms of what you can contribute from a tax deductibility point of view.
Vumi, bringing you into this conversation, your impressions of the minister's speech, especially when it comes to thinking about savers and South African consumers when it comes to saving, some of those changes that you picked up during that speech.
Motheo, I think the reset marks a reassuring step forward, and it allows for investors to plan and essentially reposition themselves with greater confidence. And from a practical perspective, that looks like revisiting monthly budgets, which can actually help you with redirecting any additional disposable income from tax relief into long-term investments.
Some of the changes included by the minister in the budget speech, Vumi, included that individual contribution going up to 46,000 Rand per tax year. Can you just break that down, what it would mean month on month for somebody who's already putting away money or is looking to put away money on a tax-free savings?
So essentially, Motheo, that just means from a month-to-month basis, if you do have a debit order running, it actually equates to about roughly 3,833 Rand per month. So previously, it was 3,000 Rand per month, which reached 36,000 Rand at the end of the tax year. But now we're looking at roughly 3,833 Rand per month. And if you break that down even further, it's about 126 Rand per day, which I think is doable.
126 Rand per day sounds quite reasonable when you break it down. I mean, the 46,000 Rand sounds quite cumbersome if you're somebody that is, working on their budget. But if you break it down, it's an amount that you can eventually afford to try put away in your tax-free savings.
I agree with you, Motheo. I think it really does sound a little bit more achievable when you break it down in bite-sized chunks. And it's crucial to understand that you cannot carry forward unused allowances. So what that means is if you do not contribute the full 46,000 Rand in this tax year, and maybe, for example, you do 30,000 Rand, you cannot add the additional 16,000 Rand in the following tax year. And that applies across all providers combined, not per account. So if you do have a tax-free fixed deposit or a tax-free investment, these rules apply for both.
Vumi, maybe to add on to that, I think what's also important is that it does give investors and savers the opportunity to invest 10,000 Rand per tax year more. And while that is such a good thing because you have the ability to let that money grow tax-free for a longer period, the flip side of it is that you also have to be very diligent in how much you've contributed. So with the increased yearly tax limit, you'll be able to get to that 500,000 Rand lifetime limit a little bit quicker. And we've spoken about this previously, but given that tax-free savings started around 11 years ago, there are certain individuals that will get quite close to that lifetime limit. And I think it's quite important to keep track of that, especially given the hefty penalty that's payable if you over-contribute.
Johan, that penalty at around 40%, quite hefty, right? So, but does it mean if I go over by as much as 50 Rand, 100 Rand, let's say 500,000 is the cap, right? But if I go over by 50 to 100 Rand, do I still get penalized?
Motheo, unfortunately, at this point in time, the lifetime limit is still 500,000 Rand. So any contribution in excess of 500,000 Rand or 46,000 Rand per tax year from the first Rand that you overcontribute will be penalized.
Another major adjustment that came through from the national budget is the increase in the retirement fund deduction cap from 350,000 Rand to about 430,000 Rand. What does this mean in practice for somebody that's putting away money?
Motheo, to break that down, the rule states that you can contribute up to 27.5% of the greater of remuneration or taxable income with a upper end cap. And what that means is that based on your income, you can contribute 27.5% of that to a maximum of 430,000 Rand. So I think the principle for me is that if you're not getting close to the 27.5% mark, that would be the first point to look at, is to say that because there is such a tax efficient way to save for retirement and it's so advantageous from a tax perspective, you want to be contributing as close to that 27.5% as possible. And then obviously keeping in mind that there's an upper limit of 430,000 Rand.
And the previous ceiling was around 350,000 Rand. What would be some of the incentives then for people that are higher income earners?
So if you were in the situation where you previously hit that cap of 350,000 Rand, you now have an additional 80,000 Rand per year that you can contribute towards retirement annuities, pension funds, provident funds. And on that additional 80,000 Rand that you can contribute, that will be tax deductible, which means in the simplest form that you will be eligible to receive the additional tax that you've paid too much back from SARS when you do your tax returns. And that can be used to fund your tax-free savings, reinvest in your retirement savings, or even contribute to discretionary funds. So if we think of that, before your funds have compounded or grown in any way, you're getting a minimum of 18% up to a maximum of 45% back of anything that you contribute towards your retirement funds.
Vumi, when you look at that 430,000 Rand cap, if you do exceed it, nothing is lost there. What are other benefits to look forward to when it comes to retirement annuity funds?
The benefits actually extend further than just the retirement annuities. And I think it's crucial to note that it actually increases the top-up as well that you could have for your pension and provident funds. And should you over-contribute, it's slightly different from the implications of a tax-free investment. The contributions here above the limit for a retirement annuity, pension fund, and provident fund top-up are carried forward. But the increase now reduces the need to do that. And I would actually say the important nuance is geared towards adequate retirement funding, not simply tax reduction, because the goal is not about chasing deductions, essentially. It is about solving for retirement income in a disciplined way.
Vumi, you make such an important point on this. Given the savings and investment culture in South Africa, this incentive from a tax perspective makes it a lot more attractive for South Africans to really bolster their savings and create adequate retirement provision for the day that they stop working.
Well, we're talking tax changes that came out of the 2026 budget speech and how they will affect your money. We'll take a quick break and get back after this.
Planning ahead should feel simpler. With the new Save and Invest journey on Investec Online and the app, you can explore savings and investment options in one easy place, from tax-free savings to other ways to invest for the future. Browse, compare, and learn more as you go. Find Save and Invest in the app or on Investec Online and start exploring.
Welcome back to Everything Counts. We're in conversation with Investec financial advisor Vumi Dludlu and Johan Loubser, the head of advisor enablement at Investec. If we zoom out of the headline changes that happened in the national budget, what else in the 2026 tax updates could influence how South Africans structure their portfolios, Vumi?
In and amongst all the changes made in this year's budget speech, Motheo, there's just 3 points I'd like to highlight. The first one being the personal income tax brackets and rebates adjusted for inflation. Second being capital gains tax annual exclusions increasing by 10,000 Rand from 40,000 to 50,000 Rand, which means individuals benefit from slightly more tax-free capital gains each year. And last but certainly not least, the single discretionary allowance increasing from 1 million to 2 million, and that is a proposed increase. So, Motheo, the idea is that even if saving and retirement changes grab attention, smaller adjustments can meaningfully influence portfolio structure.
And Johan, looking at some of the factors that Vumi has just mentioned, how do these local tax changes interact with offshore investing through the single discretionary allowance?
Motheo, we've chatted about tax-free savings in retirement vehicles, and I think what we have to keep in mind is that these, in their simplest form, still remain domestic from a tax structure perspective. And what that means is that these investments are rand denominated. So when we think about offshore investing, you do have the ability to externalize funds, so to move them from rands into foreign currency and then invest them in foreign currency. So where the single discretionary allowance comes in is that previously you could externalize funds, move them from rands into foreign currency, and you had an allowance of 1 million Rand per calendar year that you can externalize funds. So the change that Vumi mentioned is that is now increased to 2 million Rand. So essentially, that is doubled. And investors can now externalize funds and invest in offshore currency without any tax clearance up to 2 million Rand per calendar year.
Johan, given all these changes, how does one then prioritize all these things?
Motheo, that's such a great question. And I think there's a lot of tax benefits that you can get out of all of these changes. One of the key principles is that tax optimization should not override your overall investment and diversification strategy. When you look how you should prioritize these matters, I think the first thing that I would look at is, am I saving sufficiently for retirement? And while doing that, maximizing the local tax-free growth where appropriate. Once you've done that and you are on track for your retirement goals, you're maximizing these tax deductible and tax-free limits, you can then look at offshore exposure in line with your long-term objectives. So to bring that back, I think what you want to do is save sufficiently for retirement in a tax-efficient manner, and then build out your discretionary wealth, which could include offshore exposure, whether that's in rands or in foreign currency.
And just to echo your point, Johan, structured planning matters more than product selection. And practically what that looks like could, for example, be sitting with your financial advisor, having a look at your objectives and your overall needs and seeing which product best suits those needs.
You've all given us great points that have come out from the 2026 tax changes from the national budget. But if I'm somebody in a car in traffic listening or at home, my head is spinning a little bit because, yes, I've got my head around what I've invested in and my tax-free savings. But how does somebody listening today, break it down? What should they do this week to get up to date?
I would really encourage the listeners to sit down with their financial advisor, have a look at how you can best align these increased allowances with your long-term goals. And this will assist in assessing whether retirement contributions are below the new 430,000 Rand deductible ceiling, and perhaps look at other ways in which you can reach that 430,000 Rand contribution.
Johan, there's a lot to take in. What exactly should I be sitting down and reviewing? What exactly am I looking at to make sure, my finances are up to date, but also that I'm keeping track with how much I've contributed?
Vumi made a very important point earlier, and she spoke around debit orders for tax-free savings. Last tax year, you were allowed up to 3,000 Rand per month. It's now sitting at 3,833. So one of the first things I would do is to review debit orders where you have debit orders. Number one, to make sure that they are aligned with the new maximum allowable contribution from a monthly perspective. And then secondly, also confirm the total contributions that you're making if you are contributing across multiple platforms. Because at the end of the day, your 46,000 Rand limit per tax year is applicable to all tax-free savings, not per product that you hold.
And Johan, I think it gives listeners a great opportunity to sit down, have a look at how much they're currently contributing, perhaps towards their retirement annuities, pension funds and provident funds, and perhaps reassess that if required.
And the great thing there, Vumi, with that is that contributions above the limit are carried forward, which means with this increase, there's not much need to defer. Johan, looking at the tax year, like we started this conversation, we're well into it now. For those who say, I've got the lump sum, I can go into it, with that. Is it something to consider when the tax year starts? And is there a better benefit for maybe somebody who says they want to contribute every month instead of just throwing in a lump sum?
Motheo, both of them do offer unique benefits. So I think look at your personal circumstances, consider whether a lump sum in March makes sense financially for you. Do you have other expenses coming up during the tax year? Because the benefit of a lump sum at the start of the tax year is that you give the funds 12 months to compound. Those funds remain invested for the full tax year. However, when we look at debit orders, some of the benefits that they carry is that if you are investing in a fund, and as we know, markets can move up and down, you do get the benefit of Rand cost averaging, which essentially means you buy into the market at different levels. So I think both carry some benefit. Ultimately, you have to sit down and assess what works best for you holistically. And at the end of the day, then decide how you want to tackle these new limits, but make sure that you maximize them.
Vumi, many of us are lastminute.coms, right? We want to have that lump sum to throw it in just before the tax year ends. What are the misgivings of doing something like that?
And Motheo, you essentially miss out on the whole year's worth of compounding interest. So rather than waiting to do it at the end, so at the end of February, rather do it at the beginning of the tax year, 1st of March, to get the year ahead's compounding interest.
So it's the time that's quite important to be in the market so that, you benefit more in terms of the compounding.
Spot on, Motheo. I'd say time when it comes to investing is your best friend.
Vumi, I'd like to give you the last word around not being able to catch up what you missed so that full tax year is there for you to use. And it's quite important to work out the sums, even if it's on a monthly basis, to make sure you can get as close as you can to that target.
No, 100%, Motheo. And again, just to reiterate the point around sitting with your financial advisor, seeing what best suits you and your objectives and your overall investment portfolio would be a good thing to do.
Thank you very much to Vumi and Johan for helping us make sense of the new regulations that are coming in this year. To our listeners, the tax year has already started. The allowances are larger. The question isn't just what changed, but whether you're going to use the changes. Because when it comes to saving and investing, everything counts. On the next episode, we'll swing back to a special series, Everything Counts Sports Edition. This time, sitting down with golfing star Khayuri Moodley, talking money, the game, and the financial pressures on and off the course. But that's it for now. See you in a fortnight.
The views expressed are those of the contributors at the time of publication and do not necessarily represent the views of the firm and should not be taken as advice or recommendations. Investec Private Banking, a division of Investec Bank Limited, a registered credit provider committed to the Code of Banking Practice as regulated by the National Financial Ombudsman.